Welcome everybody to the Future-Proof Cities, responding to climate change in the Netherlands and Italy, circular economy and resilience. I'm Antonella Totaro with Magazine Renewable Matter, and I will be your host for today's webinar. The webinar is organized by the Embassy and the Consulate General of the Netherlands in Italy, in collaboration with the Euro-Mediterranean Center on Climate Change. Before starting, I would like to share with you some data about cities. Today, the 55% of the world's population lives in urban areas, a proportion that is expected to increase to 68% by 2050. Actually, the gradual shift of human population from rural to urban areas, combined with the overall growth of the world population, could add another 2.5 billion people to urban areas by 2050. In terms of size, cities occupy only 2% of the world's landmass. In terms of climate impact, cities leave an enormous footprint. Cities actually consume over 2/3 of the world's energy and account for more than 70% of the global CO2 emissions. Also, with 90% of the world's urban areas situated on coastlines, cities are at high risk for some of the most devastating impacts of climate change, such as rising sea levels and powerful coastal storms. With this data in mind, the Embassy and the Consulate General of the Kingdom of the Netherlands to Italy and CMCC Foundation decided to organize this webinar, also with the aim to explore how Italy and the Netherlands are rethinking their cities to be future-proof. So, what will happen today? From the importance of data to the limits of our planetary boundaries, from resilience strategies to the research on material flow, we will try to understand how Dutch and Italian cities are getting prepared for the coming decades in a way that keeps people, environment, and economics in balance. Let's have a look at the speakers that will join us today. First of all, we will have a welcome speech by Désirée Bonis. She's the ambassador of the Kingdom of the Netherlands to Italy. Then, 4 speakers. Paola Mercogliano, she's the director of the REMHI division at the Euro-Mediterranean Center of Climate Change Foundation. Christiaan Norde from the city of Amsterdam is the policy advisor international affairs. Ilaria Giuliani from the Municipality of Milan, where she has the role of Deputy Chief Resilience Officer. And finally, Tamara Streefland as City Program Lead at Metabolic, a Dutch consultancy firm. Before starting, I would like to share our happiness about the interest that many of you have shown for this webinar, not just from Italy and from the Netherlands, but from many other European countries. Thank you so much for joining us today. Then a few housekeeping rules. The audio and the video are deactivated by default. If you wish to share questions for the Q&A section, there will be after the presentations of the speakers. There is a Q&A section at the bottom of the Zoom window that you can use to post your questions. The questions that won't be discussed in this phase, we will reach you out after the webinar and we will be happy to answer by email. Also, as you have already noticed, the webinar is being recorded. And finally, you can find in the coming days the video recorded and uploaded on the CMCC YouTube channel and also on the website www.cmcc.it. Any other question, you can please reach out to webinar@cmcc.it. But now, with any further ado, I will happy to leave the floor to Désirée Bonis, Ambassador of the Kingdom of the Netherlands to Italy. Please, Désirée.
Grazie Antonella. E benvenuti a tutti i partecipanti e ai nostri relatori italiani. Hartelijk welkom ook aan onze Nederlandse deelnemers en gastsprekers. A warm welcome to all from Rome. Today's topic, the impact of climate change on and how cities need to react on this and prepare themselves for the future, is of great importance to us all. Cities are living creatures in the landscape. Cities offer home, leisure and work to many people and are often part of a long historic existence of human beings at a certain place near a river or a sea. Working on resilient cities means getting in conversation with all stakeholders in the city and around it, seeking together the optimal solution for the future. Together, we should be looking for an integrated approach, connecting water, food, economy, governance, infrastructure, energy and waste in an optimal sustainable mix. Resilience also means becoming more and more circular as a city, on goods, but also on water. Because climate change is confronting us with droughts and heavy rainfall, as we experience in Italy, but also in the north of Europe, we'll have to connect the two. Last week, we saw devastations caused by the heavy rains and intense floodings in northwestern Europe, especially in parts of Germany, Belgium, and the Netherlands, with many people killed and hundreds of people still missing. Various factors contribute to flooding, but a warming atmosphere caused by climate change makes extreme rainfall and extreme drought more likely. By the end of this week, the 22nd and 23rd of July in Naples, the G20 Ministerial on Environment, Climate and Energy will take place. And we are pleased that the Netherlands have been invited to participate as host country by the Italian presidency of the G20. Important subjects will be dealt with, including sustainable, resilient and circular cities for a future with net zero emissions. Today's webinar focuses on these topics in Italy and the Netherlands. In both countries, promising developments take place towards a greener economy and with substantial investments on the way, thanks also to EU Next Generation funds. It should be interesting to learn more about the so-called donut model of Amsterdam and the resilience strategy of Milan. I'm very pleased to have these best practices present here today. Milan and Amsterdam, as well as Rotterdam, are part of the C40 cities network. C40 cities are taking bold climate action, leading the way towards a healthier and more sustainable future. Let me share two examples with you. One is the agreement on climate adaptation in the Netherlands. The national government, together with municipalities, district water boards and provinces, are working closely together to accommodate investments in climate adaptation. To cope with waterlogging caused by extreme rainfall, urban areas are depaved, more greenery is planted, and water collection facilities are created. The private sector and scientific institutions are often also on board. Rotterdam is an example of a city with a strong thematic focus on this type of resilience. Second example is the city deal on circular economy. This is a special green deal between, again, the national government, cities and regions to learn from each other's best practices and to harmonize monitoring system on the circular economy. The national government is a partner in this initiative, not defining so much what has to be done, but to stimulate local initiatives, bottom up. Amsterdam has a strong thematic focus on the circular economy. Italy and the Netherlands are doing a lot together on both resilience and the circular economy, and we are keen to strengthen this cooperation. This webinar will hopefully contribute to that. I am happy to see that women are taking more and more ownership of the adaptation challenge and take a role in realizing solutions, as they should. They are equally stakeholders. I'm sure that we will be inspired this morning by the examples of Italian and Dutch experts in this field. I wish everyone a very fruitful meeting. Grazie.
Antonella, you're still muted.
Yes, thank you so much, Désirée. Thank you so much for sharing your experience, and we'll see you later for the closing remarks. Now the floor, or I should actually say the screen, is for Paola Mercogliano. She's the director of the REMHI division at the Euro-Mediterranean Center on Climate Change Foundation. And she will talk about the importance of high-resolution data on climate. Please, Paola.
Good morning. Okay, I'm going to describe you what is going on to support cities on adaptation. Okay, first of all, I would like to start from what the ambassador said. Now we need, especially over urban areas, to build very strong adaptation strategies, because there are many reasons for this. First of all, urban areas are interested by a higher impact of the climate change. This is due to different reasons. The first is that due to the interaction of climate with the built environment, the heat waves are more extreme, but also the extreme precipitation are able to give a higher impact. Then we need, especially over urban areas, to build adaptation. Also because over urban areas there are most vulnerable people, and there are very high vulnerability is present, and also there are infrastructure and services that are important not only for urban areas but also for the neighbor area. Then it's very important that urban areas are adapted, are resilient to climate change. And to do this, we need to have a nexus approach. What means? This means that we need to transform, to commute the urban areas, considering the different interaction that there are between people living in the areas, but also the built environment, the infrastructure, the different feedback. We cannot build an incremental adaptation. We need to consider all this feedback. How to do this? This is the goal of the climate of the scientific community. We need to build instrument and tool that can be used for people managing, policymakers, living, people, community living in urban areas. And this is what is going on. For example, in my division, we are now working on developing this new climate model that are able to evaluate the climate change at urban and suburban area, considering, of course, the built characterization of the features of the built area. This is very important because thanks to this model, we can now give more information about extreme precipitation, the intensity, the magnitude of this extreme event, but also to understand where are the area of the urban, of the city that are most warmer with respect to the other part of the urban areas. And this can be very important to build the adaptation. Here there are some examples of our new model, the model implemented by the community. In this slide, you have in the upper part on the left side, you have the theoretical expectation for the increase of the temperature over urban areas. It's expected, as I said before, that urban areas are warmer with respect to the neighbor area due to the environment, the built environment. Now our models are able to see these features. This is something new. And for example, you have in the bottom part of the slide this capability to detect that urban areas are warmer. For example, here is reported the Milan city center. The Milan city center is represented by the model as a bubble, a warm bubble. And you can distinguish also the neighbor area where there are more green area, and then the temperature is lower. The same can be, for example, reported for other cities. Here in the example is reported Vienna. This is quite important because we can then support better the policymaker. What about flood? About flood, the model that we are now developing in the community are more able to characterize the extreme precipitation at a hourly time range. This is important because, for example, if we are able to understand which is the right intensity of precipitation, we can use this information to build to flood risk analysis and then to understand where are the part of the urban area most impacted by this flood. For example, where there are the higher damages, considering also where are the infrastructure, and then this is very important to build the adaptation, because we need to think measure and strategy of adaptation for this specific suburban area in a different way. We cannot define the adaptation considering each part of the area as equal to the other ones. This is very, very important. And finally, not only models, because of course models can support our understanding of the climate, of the current climate and of the expected climate, but also we need to define tools that are able to understand the efficiency of the adaptation measures to be implemented in the urban areas. Because we need to stress this point, that adaptation is a local, cannot be, as I told before, a up-bottom approach, but is really something that needs to be built with the community and considering the specific features of the urban area. Because, for example, in the example reported in this slide, for example, you can see that the green roof that can be very efficient to decrease the impact of extreme precipitation are not efficient, for example, when there are heat waves. Then adaptation needs to be considered in the specific context, not only urban context, but also considering where are the vulnerable people, where are the exposure. And also about the green areas, it is important to stress that the green area need to be put in the right place, and because we cannot, generally speaking, about adaptation and efficiency. We need to think about adaptation as something that need to be considered in the specific context. Then the nexus approach, as I told before, is really important. We need to stress in the local aspect of the feedback among the different parts living in the urban areas. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Paola. Everybody can share questions, as I said before, in the Q&A section, but I have a quick question for you immediately. I was wondering, as researchers are finding out that the way we build cities can worsen extreme heat, how can we redesign cities to be more prepared to withstand heat waves? What's only one key element you would work on, and would you suggest to policymakers to work on?
Okay, as I told before, today we have the models and we have the tool, but perhaps what we really need is to know where are the vulnerable people. We need to understand, in order to build adaptation, where are the most vulnerable people. We don't need, at the moment, it's very difficult for us to prepare adaptation plan because we know quite well about the hazard, but we don't know where are the people that need to have our support. In order to develop an adaptation plan that is useful, we need to collect data about the infrastructure, about the people, about the services. I think that now to build this database of information is really important to decrease the risk in the urban areas.
Thank you so much, Paola. That was great. So now we get a bit more practical to understand what cities are actually doing. And it's the turn of Christiaan Norde, is the policy advisors of international affairs of Gemeente Amsterdam. And actually he will tell us about the journey that Amsterdam is doing with the donut model. Please, Christiaan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Antonella, and thank you, CMCC, and also thank you, Ambassador, for inviting the City of Amsterdam to tell a bit more about the journey that Amsterdam has with the donut model, which hopefully some of you or most of you will already know. It's going to be a quick journey since we only have we have 5 minutes or a bit more to talk about it, and I think I'm proud to represent the City of Amsterdam on this aspect, since we've been working very hard on this on the donut model and implementing this in the circular strategy for the City of Amsterdam in the last 6 years already. And I think today we'll also talk about the link with, of course, with the green recovery, looking forward to the G20 summit. And I think one of the key things when you talk about recovery is that if you do this, the things you always done and you do them again, you get the same results again. And I think one of the key aspects is that looking at the current way we produce and consume and live in our society, we have to realize, and we have realized already, that this is not the right way going forward. We see lots of pollution, we see lots of social inequalities, we see, of course, the climate change happening. So we have to transfer or change the way of how we view things. And I think the term well-being economy is something that has been coined by many cities already, which is a very positive thing. But this is what we have to aim for. And I think what you see here on the slide is also a little bit of an example of why the impact of your city has to be viewed on a global scale. If you look at the way we consume and produce in the City of Amsterdam, 63% of the emissions we produced by our city are outside of our city boundaries. So it is something that you have to look on a global scale and you have to solve together. And it feels sometimes that with lots of the initiatives when it comes to becoming climate neutral or becoming a circular city, it sometimes feels a little bit like we're putting band-aids on the damage that we are causing causing ourselves. So if we don't change the way we produce and consume, we can just put on band-aids time and time again. We will not change the cause of everything. So this is really the way or the reason why we think, first of all, that the circular strategy is very important. And we also adopted the donut model, which is a theory used by Kate Raworth, which some of you might have known. And I think the basis of being circular is, of course, that you want to reuse the materials and close the waste streams in your city. And when you look at you might see a donut on the right side of your screen. I think everything that we do within a city, we have to do within 2 boundaries, which is, first of all, the ecological boundaries, which is things that are related to climate change, air pollution, biodiversity, for example. But you have to do it also within the social foundation that society gives you. And this is based on the SDGs. So you need to ensure that this will be a just transition and that you have to take into account all those social elements when designing your policies and when setting up your projects. And this, of course, sounds very nice if you state that, but how do you do this and how does it work in practice? This is, of course, also where it becomes very difficult, still also for the City of Amsterdam. So we asked also Kate Raworth to develop a first city portrait for the City of Amsterdam, in which we set out a baseline where we are in our city when looking at the donut model and what policies we need to change and have the most effect when you look at the city and when you look at the impact of the city on social and ecological scales. You see some examples that on the right side of your screen. For example, if you look at the local level and also at the social boundaries, the question you would ask yourself is, what would it mean for the people of Amsterdam to thrive? And of course, as I showed in the first slide, it has a global impact on everything we do. So if you look at the social aspect and the global lens, you would see that the question, what would it mean for Amsterdam to respect the well-being of people worldwide? So in this way, we're not looking only at ourselves. I think there's a lot being said already on creating a more of a local economy, also because it has many advantages, but also looking at the impact that you have outside of your own city boundaries is something you have to take into account. The donut model, I think this was very brief, but there's a lot more to it, of course, but this is the concept that we've used to set up our own Amsterdam circular strategy. And I think we've been quite open on that we adapted the donut model because we also realized that we're not the only stakeholder in this process. But as a city, we want to lay out the vision of that this is the way we think we should go forward. And we invite also other companies or the stakeholders from a local level, national level to join forces, or at least to jointly work on this transition that we have to make to go towards a more well-being economy. And also to make it more practical, Amsterdam has a circular strategy for 2020 to 25, which was, of course, started last year. And there's a separate innovation and implementation program in which we have over 200 projects already running into the city. And one of the key elements already mentioned also by Paola, of course, and also Désirée, is that we have to monitor our progress. So it's no use by making statements that you want to be circular. You have to realize how you can make those steps in becoming circular. So that's why we work together with research institutions, together with all companies and stakeholders, to try to measure or where we are on these different social and ecological, let's say, boundaries, and see what would be the best next step in terms of policy to stay or to improve the situation. And I think the key word, nexus, is already being coined as well, is that you have to look at it in an integrated way. You can't just look at the circular economy or the climate neutral task as a sustainability topic or just a sustainability theme. It's all about mobility. It's all about social themes. It's also economical theme. You have to discuss with economic affairs in your city and companies what role they can play in order to change into this more well-being economy. And we look forward also how the U20, so the urban areas 20, have also developed a communiqué in which we stated quite a few points also visible in the circular strategy of Amsterdam, how also EU institutions, how national governments can play their part and also play a role in transitioning towards a more circular society that includes everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Christiaan. Actually, I was wondering how that works practically, like on the field, what's happening day after day in Amsterdam, and who does what and what's going on, let's say.
Well, like I said, there's a lot of projects already. I can quickly share a slide on that we have here. I think what we see is that we've identified and also provide a platform also for not just for the city of Amsterdam, but also for local initiatives, companies to show how they benefit or how they work on circular themes. And we have an online platform in which you can show your examples, show the work you've been doing, and also helping others to share this knowledge on how you work in the city and how do you. It can be small, tiny projects in a local community center, but it can also be big companies that have a different view on how to reuse their raw materials. And by showing this online and also telling about it and providing or facilitating the knowledge exchange, and also this will enhance also the speed of the transition that we're going through. And once again, I think if you identify projects, you can also identify the tangible results of what actually you are doing. And it's more than just talking the talk, which is often being said about national governments, but also walking the walk, which is showing in practice what we do in cities. And of course, there's a lot of local initiatives, and that's also you have the Amsterdam Donut Coalition, for example, in which many stakeholders are joined forces and set up meetings, also talk about what they do in terms of the donut model.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And so after Amsterdam, we are moving to, actually, we go back to Italy, and we are gonna discover what's happening in Milan, thanks to Ilaria Giuliani. She's the Deputy Chief of Resilience Officer of the Municipality of Milan, and she will talk about the resilience and the circular strategies of the city of Milan. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody, and thank you all for the invitation. Okay, here we are. So again, thank you for the invitation, and thank you for the speakers who talked before me. Everything was very interesting and very aligned as well with the strategy and the plans and the projects that the Municipality of Milan is developing. I'm the Deputy Chief Resilience Officer, and together with Piero Pellizzaro, who is the Chief Resilience Officer, we coordinate all the activity of the City Resilience Department. We are part of a bigger department. We are included within a bigger department, which is called the Environmental Transition Department, which is a new department that the Municipality of Milan decided to create like 2 years ago. In order to, give the adequate floor and space to the development of a specific strategy related to climate change and related to environment. The Environmental Transitions Department is composed by us, the City Resilience Department, together with the Climate and Energy area and together with the Water Resource and Environmental Hygiene area. And what is critical and important to say is the fact that we still don't have a deputy mayor for the Environmental Transition Department, because the mayor itself is in charge of this department. And of course, this shows which is the commitment of the municipality towards this challenge. We as City Resilience Department has been created within the structure of the municipality after the municipality won the 100 Resilient City call, the 100 Resilient City competition promoted by and founded by the Rockefeller Foundation. The department was created in 2017. And after that, we start to develop a specific project strategy and to deliver the milestones that were scheduled and previewed by the projects. We work closely, and I'm happy to say this, we work closely, very, very closely within this year with Rotterdam. Over there, they have a City Resilience Department, they have a Chief Resilience Officer, and the collaboration was super useful and super powerful in these years. We deliver first, as the first milestone, a preliminary resilience assessment in order to understand which was the, let's say, the state of the art related to the topic of resilience back in 2018. And within this preliminary resilience assessment, we developed an identification of the main shocks and stress for the city of Milan. After that, we moved through all the phases of the project, and we arrived to the publication, to the development of a resilience strategy, which is built upon 3 main pillars. You see here on the left, where the shock and stresses we identify through a very intense process of stakeholder engagement back in 2017 and 18. And here you can understand, let's say, the most important thing of our approach. That is the fact that we are not only considering climate change and environment by themselves, but especially we are considering, as Paola was saying at the very beginning in her intervention, we are considering which are the impacts of these challenges on the city and especially on the most vulnerable population. So we are considering as well, and overlapping together with environment and with climate change, social and economic aspects. From the identification of shock and stress, we have been through the identification and the development of 6 thematic areas. You can see them in the middle, which were related to water, to living, to green areas, to circularity, to safety, and to infrastructure, generally speaking. And through this identification of 6 areas, we decided to structure our resilience strategy on 3 main topics, which are the services and procedure, the infrastructures and spaces, and the inhabitants and community. Of course, we don't have to read them and to approach them separately, but we really need to work on them through an overlapping of these 3 layers and through all the aspects that can be integrated at the same time. From the 3 pillars, from these thematic 3 pillars, we have been working on identification of specific actions. Of course, we have been doing this very closely with all the other departments of the municipality. Here you can see a general overview of which are the main plans, strategies, and projects we have been working and on which we have been collaborating with other colleagues. I want to mention specifically the PGT, which is the Piano di Governo del Territorio, let's say the strategic land use plan for the city of Milan, that was reviewed by the municipality like 2 years ago. And we have been included in this plan specific rules for sustainability and resilience, creating a new index for climate reduction for building structures. Then we have been working closely with the energy and climate area in order to develop the PAC, the plan for air and climate. We are working with the Food Policy Office in order to see how we can address the topic of food. We are working with the Economy and Urban Work Department in order to develop specific strategy for the circular economy. So we are somehow using our department, our city resilience departments, in order to include specific new points of view within the strategies of the colleague inside the municipality. Thanks to these 3 years of our work and thanks to the collaboration we have been able to implement with the colleagues, we have been able to develop a specific method that we are trying somehow to officialize and to formalize within the municipality, that goes through different phases that you can see here in the slides. So there's each time that we need to approach new projects or new strategies that are related to climate change, that are related to adaptation or mitigation processes, or that are related to the needs of overlapping, as I was saying before, environmental aspects together with social and economical aspects, we try to tackle the problems, tackle the challenges through these 4 main phases. You can see there is a first phase of analysis and research. So we try to understand which are the main risks we are facing, both external and internal. So which are the external ones, so which are the main shock and stresses the city is facing within that specific challenge or that specific project, but as well internal, so which are the main methods, processes, and methodology the municipality can apply. Then we go through the diving phases. We try to understand which are the areas of relevance in order to face the problem, to face the challenge. We understand which are the main macro trends, which are the analyses, which are the data that we can consider in order to develop a possible solution. Then there is the phase, of course, of the take action. So we, as I was saying, we push very much the topic of coordination and collaboration. We brainstorm, we identify with other colleagues opportunity and strategies, and then we define a specific package of actions. And then, of course, there is the phase of reporting. So each time we try to develop new processes, new projects, we always take into consideration the fact that we need to monitor which are the main effects of the things we are implementing. Just to give you an example, the Air and Climate Plan, I was mentioning this before. In the last month, in the last, let's say, actually years, we have been working closely with the area for energy and climate. And we've been working together as well with C40 on the development of this plan. The plan is actually, it has the capability of integrating at the same time 3 main components, which are the mitigation strategy, the adaptation strategy, and the air quality strategy. So for the first time, the municipality has been able to develop one only plan in order to use 3 different strategies that are trying to tackle and face climate change and the process of environmental transitions. The plan is now under approval by the City Council and is composed by different 49 actions that are developed again, thanks to the collaboration of all the departments and of all the colleagues. Just to give you another overview very briefly, we are of course working together with our colleagues very hardly on the topic of circular economy. Here you have just few highlights of the main topics on which we try to approach and implement let's say the framework of the circular economy. Of course, in relation to waste management, of course, as I was saying a couple of slides before, in relation to the topic of food, you know that the Municipality of Milan is the promoter of the Food Policy Pact together with other international cities. We are trying to push the concept of circular economy as well on the topic of energy. And of course, since Milan is the capital, one of the capital for fashion, we are as well trying to apply the concept of circular economy on the fashion, let's say, world. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ilaria. There was a great overview of what's happening in Milan. So I would go back actually to the Netherlands now with Tamara Streefland, as she's the city program lead at Metabolic, as she will talk about how we can really achieve circular economy for cities. Thank you so much, Tamara, for joining us today. The screen is yours. That's the case to say.
Thank you for having me. Let me just share. So I hope that everybody can see this now. And let's dive in. So, I thought it would be nice to start with an image of kind of like an imaginative image of the city of the future. And we've tried to capture that. So a couple of characteristics here is that a future city is designed for all species and has integrated natural spaces. It has healthy, happy, and resilient communities. It doesn't waste resources, and it leaves no negative impact elsewhere. And it also leaves plenty of space for wilderness to thrive, so it is quite compact. And we can talk about this all day, I'm pretty sure, with everybody in this room. But in sum, like, our future cities should function within the planetary boundaries, while dividing sufficient resources in a just and equitable way amongst all inhabitants. So within the donut, like Christiaan was saying it. But we aren't there yet, because right now, we're currently, we're fueling our cities through this extractive economy, using lots of land, bringing resources in through complex supply chains and manufacturing these resources into products we can hardly take apart. And then we waste them. So we're wasting many resources at what we call the end of life. So we're crossing the planetary boundaries, leading to negative impacts such as land use degradation, climate change-induced weather events like the floods the ambassador was talking about, and pollution, often affecting communities that are already marginalized inside and outside of our cities. So we need to transform our economy. And we can do that by radically changing the way that we design and plan our cities and our value chains. And this is what we're working on with Metabolic. So we're working to changing or transforming the global economy to a fundamentally sustainable state as soon as possible. So one way of doing that is going from a linear to a circular economy. That was a very quick one. But I wanted to get to this one because we see the circular economy as an holistic framework. So not only thinking about materials, but also taking the energy, water, biodiversity, human health and culture, and also other types of value into account. And this is so that we avoid burden shifting, coming up with a solution on one end, materials, that has a negative consequence somewhere else. So we use a systems approach. So our work with cities goes across the world, but I wanted to highlight Rotterdam and Milan today. Our work generally goes through all scales. So we look at material flows, but we also look at buildings. We look at how these buildings function in their neighborhoods, how neighborhoods build up a city, and then finally how the city interacts in the urban region. So highlighting two cases, starting with Rotterdam. We've been working with Rotterdam for the last 4 years, and in 2017 we started with a building a circular economy roadmap. And I think this is a very nice way of highlighting the process that we usually take from going, starting with a current state analysis. Where are we now? Because if you don't know where you are, it's pretty difficult to understand where you want to go. To then goal setting and setting a vision, coming up with a strategy with interventions, and then getting to implementation and monitoring. Good Christiaan was also mentioning for Amsterdam. So in 2017, we used material flow analyses. So this is what we use in a lot of our work. We map all the resources that go in to a city and also go out of the city as a basis to identify where we can intervene to make a lot of impact. Leverage points. So here, one of the leverage points we identified was the building and demolition waste. A lot of that was being downcycled instead of being used again in new buildings. So ever since, we built a strategic roadmap together with lots of partners in the city of Rotterdam. And now we're a couple of years further, but we stayed involved in implementation. So one of the projects that came out of this was working together with different sectors and the municipality to see where we should land a secondary material storage facility for construction materials. So as a basis for that, we first mapped where are these secondary materials freeing up. So what is being demolished? Where do we have a source? And then also what is going to be constructed? So where can we utilize them again? So that's one of the projects that came out. We've also been involved afterwards with the municipality and thinking about food policy. So really working together with different departments to understand what is the food system in Rotterdam? And then also where are we already enacting policies and where are policy gaps? So this is one of the projects that also came out of that. And then finally, we're working very closely with the municipality of Rotterdam and also the province of Zuid-Holland right now to set up a monitoring dashboard so that they can very actively monitor the progress on achieving their goals and objectives. Very briefly, I also wanted to highlight our work with Milan, because the project with Rotterdam we do with our consulting, but we also have a think tank, and our think tank works in a lot of European projects that are often longer term and with multiple cities. And one of these projects that Amsterdam is also part of is Reflow. So here we work with 6 different cities to go for very detailed material flow analyses and really thinking about how we can build actionable strategies that can come to a more circular practices. So this is with Berlin, Amsterdam, Milan, Vela, Cluj, and Paris. And each of these cities had different material streams they focused on. Amsterdam focused on textiles, and in Milan focused on organic flows or food flows. So there's much more to this diagram, and I will very much encourage you to go to our website where I think it lives, because we can talk about these diagrams for days. But a couple of the strategies that came out of this was that based on the material flow analysis and interviews of both the city as a whole, but also the biggest distribution centers, a couple of strategies were to optimally distribute food surplus within known food deserts across Milan, to ensure sustainable sourcing for all of the 3 Soggiorni, and that's the big distribution food center in Milan, and also have traceable supply chains. So really see where the food comes from, and to also build shorter climate resilient supply chains to ensure the security of healthy and nutritious food. And there's a very big report out there that illustrates all of these strategies, but I don't want to take up too much of your time. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much, Tamara. You're right. I would go straight to the discussion, and we just got also a question from our audience from Giovanni Ludovico Montagnani that is asking to everybody if you can provide examples of what are the main obstacles to adaptation plans implementation. Yeah, also one of my question would be, what did you learn? What was one of your lessons learned about what's absolutely not the way to go, not the good direction, something that you tried and didn't work, or you can go both ways, or something that you tried didn't work, or something that you see as main obstacles and we need to work really on that. I don't know who wants to answer first. Maybe Christiaan, I'm just giving the microphone to you.
to show what didn't work.
Or which are the main obstacles you're still working on?
Well, first of all, I think one of the, I think it's good that there's no deputy mayor here that might be a little bit more political maybe than I am. So maybe I'll use the freedom that I have with that in that sense. One of the difficult things when we talk about the donor model and the implementation is also how to make it a task for all deputy mayors and for the mayor itself, that they commit to the steps that have to be taken. And I think there's a very interesting discussion at the moment. Amsterdam is setting up a platform for cities called Cities for Change, in which we want to combine with progressive cities to adapt and commit to a more, let's say, radical agenda when it comes to the economy. And just by working on a draft statement on what we want to achieve, you realize that the moment you ask the city for that to sign on behalf of the city of Amsterdam, and you realize what you're stating, you get into very interesting discussions with the, for example, Deputy Mayor on Economic Affairs, who has different interests when it comes to changing an economic system. And also these discussions are far from done within the city of Amsterdam, and they do certainly take time. And I think this is one of the key aspects, is that you cannot change it all by yourself, even as a city, and you really have to create a momentum and let's say make small incremental steps to actually make progress when it comes to this transition. And you will certainly encounter many different opinions that are mostly based on short-term points. And I think the discussions we have within our local government certainly highlight that. And this is something that you will have to take into account when starting on this journey.
Thank you so much. I don't know if Ilaria can add something else about the obstacles and about absolutely not to try or not to do.
I want to say something about, yes, the question you were mentioning related to the main obstacle to the implementation of adaptation plan. Generally speaking, I can say on behalf, let's say, of a public administration, adaptation plan are new things, are quite new things for a public administration. So there is, of course, a matter of, I guess most of people would say that the main obstacle are money. Of course, money is an issue, but from the other side, I think it's a matter of changing our minds, changing the way most of the employee of public administration, of public servants works, on the way they approach challenges. You know, I was mentioning in my presentation the fact that we need to consider all the perspective of a specific challenge. We need to consider and to overlap different layers of analysis. That's why both me and Paola, we were mentioning the fact that climate change aspect and environmental aspects need to be overlapped with social and economic aspects. So we need really to change the way we approach our work every day. We need to change the way we prioritize our intervention. We are trying to do this with our city resilience department since the last 3 years. A very basic example we always do is the fact that, you know, of course, we plan every year our green intervention, our green projects within the city. We are just basically trying to prioritize those green interventions starting from the e-Thailand maps. It's a very basic things, but instead of, you know, putting greens like everywhere in the city without criteria and without priorities, we can consider this map as a main criteria in order to, as I was saying, prioritize our intervention and change the length, the layers we are considering in order to do our everyday job.
Thank you so much, Ilaria. And we have another question from Jean-Philippe Orambut, is asking if actually all these measures that we have to achieve circularity depend on external actors and international players, but also what realistic leverage and how quickly they can be applied, and which leverages can be used to make a difference as big players are coming into action. I don't know if Tamara has an experience about that.
As I saw that Christiaan wanted to say something, so if you want to, well, I can say something first. I think if I understood your question correctly, it's about the levers that cities have to make change, right? And this also this broader, So cities, like what you said in the beginning, cities have very small footprints, but they have a lot of the resources, and they're responsible for a lot of resource use and emissions. And there are smaller, right? So we can make a lot of impact if we change things in our cities. Now, what I wanted to add also, in line of the question that was before that, is that it's very important that we get everybody on board in the city, because of course the municipality has certain instruments to start getting change going. But then what we see in our process is that it's very important to start these driving groups around sectors, for example, where we have the private sector involved, where we also have community organizations there, and where we have the municipality and academia all working together to start pushing that change. And I think there's a lot of changes that can actually be made on the city level, and where cities can also catalyze regions and then also give the right example. That's what we see a lot in our work in the US as well. So Christiaan, I don't know if you wanted to also add something to...
Yeah, very shortly, I think I totally agree on the point you made, and I think that for the city of Amsterdam, I think one of the key elements is to start being circular yourself, and I think one of the biggest impact we can have is also with circular procurement. Amsterdam and cities in general, of course, spend a lot of money on a wide variety of topics, and if you change your tender procedures and make them more circular, you can definitely have a big impact yourself already. Okay,
thank you. Just for the audience, we just decided to extend the webinar for 15 more minutes, as we see the conversation and discussion is quite interesting. And there's another question that I think could be interesting for Paola to answer, and it's about the costs of adaptation. So if we have enough budget for mitigation strategies, what she can see from her perspective, from a research point of view, how much would that cost and how can effective they can be?
Okay, of course, this adaptation is a cost-benefit action. You have the cost, but you also have the benefit. And for me, of course, there are the costs, but if you think to the impact due to the climate change, perhaps is also cheaper to work on the adaptation. Then, to be honest, I don't know if really this is an high cost is necessary for the adaptation. For me, this is an investment for the future and to improve our life in the urban areas. Of course, there are some costs. And for this reason, I think that adaptation need to involve from the starting point, the different actors, private actors, policymakers, people with inabilities. This is also important. About mitigation, I think that we need to consider either the processes. Unfortunately, we already have on average more than 1 degree of increasing of temperature at global level. Then we need to consider the mitigation, because if you look at the different IPCC documents, you see that if we are not able to stop this increasing of the greenhouse gas in concentration in the atmosphere, the impact will be higher and higher. And unfortunately, after that, we overcome a specific threshold that is not the same in all the parts of the world, but really depends on the context. You don't have, I mean, we don't know about the possibility to come back. And then it's really important we work on the mitigation, because there are many contexts in the world that cannot live with the impact of climate change if we come to 1.5 or 2 degrees of increasing of temperature. But at the same time, we need to be realistic, because we already have a 1 degree of increasing temperature. Then we need to work on adaptation, especially for the more vulnerable part of the population, and for the urban areas where the impact are expected, are now very high. And then I think that I'm not agree that this is a cost, very high cost on the adaptation and mitigation, but this is the normal cost that we have to consider to continue to live in the urban areas, in our European areas.
Thank you so much, Paola. We have actually another question for Ilaria and Christiaan, and Federico Montanaro is asking do you envision the introduction of a fast track for adaptation measures that would reduce bureaucratic effort and help private sector to contribute to the adaptation plans? So if you have anything in mind about how can the private sector be more on board and to actually cut some bureaucracy connected to that?
If I can say, just to give you an example of the way the municipality has been trying to involve the private sector, is related to what I was mentioning during my presentation, to the contribution the City Resilient Department gave to the development of the Piano di Governo del Territorio, the Strategic Land Use Plan. Within that plan, we included, there's a specific strategy related to sustainability and resilience, and we included within the plan a specific rule that obliged and make it compulsory for the private sector whether they build new housing, new construction, or if they renovate the existing stock, they have to include within their project some naturalization aspects. So they need to reach a specific target for an index we created, which is the indice di riduzione impatto climatico, Climate Impact Reduction Index, through which they can have some depaved area in front of the building, they can have green roof, they can have green facade, so some renaturalization elements within their projects, within their architectural projects. So it's a small thing, but and still, this has been done, make it compulsory 1 year ago. So it's still quite new things, and we still need to see which are the main effects of this measure. But it's a way to, sensibilize them, to involve them in this overall renaturalization process for the whole city. So we are, included where we have some opportunities, some windows of opportunity within specific plans and projects, rule like that. So this is obliged for, as I was saying, for the private sector, and we'll see how they react to this, I guess, through a monitoring process.
Perhaps I can just give a short, small example. I think there's two ways of involving, well, there's many ways of involving the private sector. I think a pretty basic example is that Amsterdam also has a lot of interest in green roofs. So we have also a European funded program that stimulates the knowledge exchange and also provides subsidies for companies or households that want to make their roof green, which of course has benefits for the adaptation. And I think also an interesting part is that we don't always want to have a top-bottom approach, that the city tells you what you have to do. So we also have conversations with companies and sectors that basically ask what they need in order to adapt on a number of themes. So we try also to listen to what's hindering them and see how we can change our policies accordingly if there's, of course, the right benefits in doing so. And that also changes the mindset a little bit of making setting up penalties or warning people about the dangers. I think you have to be in constant conversation with all stakeholders to see what would be the best steps, and of course based on also good monitoring and good ways of showing data that actually proves what will help most.
Thank you, Christiaan. Actually, we have two questions for Tamara. I don't know how short or how long these answers can be, but let's try to answer them both. And one question is from Abdullah Mustafa that is wondering how Metabolic maps the material flows, since it's a vast task with so many materials flowing in and out the city. That's the first one. And then another one is from Mariana Guimares that based on what you just said about bringing academia together with public and private sectors, she's wondering if you can give some examples of some projects that are currently working where this partnership are clear and you are seeing that working. Thank you.
Sure. I'll try to keep it super brief. To the first question on the material flow analysis, of course, this is always a model. So we try to find as granular and context-specific data as we can. So really specific to the city, but we make a use of very many different data sets. So sometimes we have to scale down national data to the city level, but also sometimes we have to scale neighborhood data up. So we build a very elaborate model. And we've been working on this for many years. We have refined the art of material flow analysis. So it's definitely a combination of many different factors. And you're right, like it's a very fast exercise. Like you can go deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, of course, but sometimes we can also draw conclusions and then move on to visioning and setting objectives. To the question of like examples of working together with the quadruple helix, that's the term we often use in the Netherlands. I think the Rotterdam project, what I showed with the building hub, like the secondary material building hub, was an example of that. So that came forward of a driving group that we formed during the strategy process. It was very much focused around the construction sector. And as part of that, what we tried to do is use one implementation, so an action basically. And then as we were implementing that, together with Blue City, our local partner there, and the municipal government, we also used it to kind of get a consortium of private sector involved and exploring these questions like who should own, right? Who should own a center like that or a facility? What kind of policies should we adapt to make it easier? What kind of zoning regulations? Should this be an experimental zone? So it's really also doing these iterations on actions that can help you form these coalitions, I'd say.
Thank you so much, Tamara. There are many other questions, actually, I should say, but as said, probably we are running out of time and we will try to get back to you by emails after the webinar is done. But yeah, I would go for the conclusion, then for the closing remarks from the ambassador. Thank you so much, Christiaan, Paola, Ilaria, and Tamara. As we have seen, there's a lot of work ahead. Luckily, also, there are many best practices in terms of resilience and circular economy from the cities of Amsterdam, Milan, actually Rotterdam, Naples, and we can say in general, Italy and the Netherlands are ahead in this phase. Together with the C40 city networks, there are many cities around the world that they are very committed in taking bold climate action and leading the way to create more healthier and sustainable cities. Actually, the pandemic in the last months, but also the flood and the heat intensity in the last days have highlighted the importance of having communities that are resilient to emergencies. Very few events as COVID crisis made us rethink about how urban structure can be better and how can we connect these cities with health, resilience, sustainability, and prosperity. It is urgent to study, to replan cities, and to replan many elements of cities, like mobility, like food, like material flow and resources. We need to rethink, for example, public transports, shared mobility, green areas, and public spaces that can be actually truly available for children and for old people. There are luckily many local governments that are very much working every day on that. And we hope with this webinar, we provided some ideas, some food for thought in a debate that will be more and more relevant in the coming days and the coming years, of course, and decades. It's an endless work, we can say, for now. And there's a lot of work to do and not so much time to lose anymore. We can just keep working in a circular, resilient direction. That's, I would say, all from my side. Thanks again to all the speakers and for bringing your experience, your vision, your knowledge. And now I would leave once again the floor to Désirée Bonis, Ambassador of the Kingdom of the Netherlands to Italy, for the closing remarks. Thank you so much to everybody that joined us today. Désirée, for you.
Well, thank you, Antonella, because you've been a great moderator to, I think, a fascinating webinar. And I want to also thank the Euro-Mediterranean Center on Climate Change Foundation, with whom we have collaborated to organize this webinar. It was a great cooperation, so I feel grateful for that. And I think the major question that we've been trying to address during this webinar was how cities should respond to the impact of climate change and how to make our cities future-proof. Because what we want is our cities to be resilient, sustainable, and circular. And in this respect, Paola talked about the nexus approach in urban areas, stressing that transformation should in some cases be radical, not incremental, and that we should not lose our out of sight those people that may be extra vulnerable to measures to be taken. Meanwhile, Christiaan explained to us the Amsterdam donut model, underlining the importance of ecological boundaries on the one hand and social effects of interventions on the other, and that the two should always be considered simultaneously to see what actually you are going to develop. Ilaria highlighted the environmental transition in Milan with very concrete examples of all the dynamic work that is being done in that fabulous city. And finally, Tamara emphasized the need to work across scales, as has been tried out in Rotterdam. I think that offers also a lot of insight in practical measures to be taken. Well, to summarize, I think all speakers without exception stressed first the need for change. Call it transition, call it transformation, but something's got to give. We have to respond. And as you just said, Antonella, we have no more time to lose. We must be quick and effective. Second point, the speakers, all of them, stressed the need for a holistic approach. All sectors should be included. Think of water, energy, food, waste. You mentioned public transport, mobility. One cannot go without the other. We have to connect all these subjects, even though this will be complicated, but it perhaps requires a new way of thinking to realize an integral, holistic approach. Third point is the importance of stakeholder. Sorry, I'm being called here. Am I still there? Yeah, it was a phone call interrupting, sorry. Third, I would like to stress the importance of stakeholder involvement. Governments should be involved, private sector should be, research institutions, but maybe most important of all, citizens, the ones inhabiting those cities, should have their say and be able to steer the way their environment is going to be reshaped. Finally, all of you stressed the importance of a good system of monitoring and evaluation. And I think it's very clear why, on the one hand, we want to measure progress so that, you know, we have to start from a baseline and see how far we come in a limited amount of time. But also we must, as different stakeholders, share failures and successes so that we can learn from each other and make progress faster. I think the whole discussion has been a very good warming up for that big G20 meeting later this week in Naples. Hopefully these ideas and similar thinking will be fed into that meeting of decision makers. It's important. And I would like to conclude that it's very important that the topic of environment, climate and energy is now high on the agenda of the G20, where it should be, because these participating countries are the most powerful economies on the planet, and we definitely need them on board. So once more, good luck to Italy, who is presiding over the G20 this year, doing a wonderful job, and the Netherlands is happy to contribute. Thank you so much, all of the participants as well. Thank you.